All right, get started. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hey, Paula, I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a new topic for me in a way. We've talked about this many times, and but it's the first time I host this webinar. So
Yeah,
yeah, how are
you're
you?
you're gonna do great. You're gonna do great. It's actually an amazing thing that now we've gotten to the point we're big enough, our team is big enough to where we have multiple people doing webinars and it's not just you all the time doing all the webinars now. So that's great. That's great. Yeah. No, I'm doing well. Just braving the winter here in Copenhagen, Denmark. So we can't all be as lucky as you down there in Spain, just soaking up the sunshine all year round. So yeah, no, I'm surviving, Actually, there was some sun today and I took a break and just stood in the window like a zombie, like, just getting in the sun rays this morning, and that was just that was incredible. But yeah, I see a bunch of people joining. Tell us, where are you tuning in from? Let us know in the chat. Usually these are very, very international groups that we have joining our webinars, and it's always great to get these perspectives from people all over the world. So, don't be shy. Let us know where you tuning in from. Drop your LinkedIn link in there if you want, so people can connect. What we usually try to do in these webinars is have a little bit of a community growing. So if you're new to Talaera webinars and you want to kind of meet others, by all means, go ahead and do that. Usually our webinar topics are focused around very specific communication points. If you're a first-time webinar attendee with Talaera, then let's kind of give you a little bit of a background about Talaera, what you have in store today. Paula, can you kind of give an overview of who we are? Who is Talaera?
Yeah, of course. So we offer business English training to professionals around the world. And our goal is to really look at the needs of the organization, of that professional, and help them communicate effectively in the workplace, but in a way that you can immediately apply it at work. We've all been to language courses where you're learning how to say I ate an apple, and that may not be what you use later. So yeah, we focus on specifically that. What is it that you're going to do? How is that going to help you do your job better? So that's a bit what we do. We'll tell a little bit more throughout the webinar, but how about we introduce ourselves as well, so people get to know us a little. Actually, I'm going to throw up Paul if you like. Super curious to hear. I see people here from everywhere on the world: Brazil, Oregon, Israel, Estonia. Oh, from Spain as well. Hello, I'm in Valencia. We have people in Lyon, Sydney, Boston, Serbia, Germany, Chicago. Wow, that's amazing. So I'm super curious, is this your first time? But while we get that information, Simon, should we introduce ourselves just
Yeah,
briefly?
yeah, yeah. My name is Simon Kennel. I'm tuning in from Copenhagen, Denmark. If you didn't notice by just the darkness and the grays that I wear and surround myself with, we call it Nordic minimalism. So that's just how we live. But no, I'm the people and culture manager with Talaera. I have a background in HR, and really my kind of introduction to Talaera was similar to Paula in that I started as a trainer. So I started as one of the English teachers after bouncing around and finding this cool ed tech company that I wanted to work for. And yeah, got my master's degree in HR and worked up some experience. And now I'm fortunate enough to be leading this awesome function at Talaera. Paula, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I also started as a business English instructor here at Talaera, and now I'm the marketing and content director. So I just make sure that all the content that we put out there to help our people learn is relevant, and that it gets to the right people as well. And yeah, I also have a background in HR and industrial psychology, and I think there's a lot that I'll be able to apply to today's webinar. I'm also certified executive coach, so there is a lot that comes in together, even marketing when it comes to engagement. I don't know if you will agree with that, but there is a little bit of that psychology and marketing when it comes to employee engagement. So yeah.
Who do we have joining in? Do we have a lot of new attendees, or what's the kind of demographic that we're looking at for our group today?
Yeah, so far we have 53% are new, so more than half of you are new. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And then 47% are not, it's not their first time, so they've been to others. I'm so happy you're back. I guess that's it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So really quick news flash before we get started. We have so many tools that we're going to share today, but there's going to be a lot that you can get today, right? So Paula, can you kind of walk us through really quickly what we have in store?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about communication and engagement and how they come together. And I just wanted to quickly show a little hint about what we have at Talaera, just so that you get an idea of the kind of training and industry knowledge that we have, so that, you know, sometimes I join a webinar, I was like, okay, but what are these people about? So yeah, we just wanted to give you a little bit of background. So we offer courses, but it's not just English courses. We go, you know, it goes beyond that, and we have effective emails across cultures. So it's not just how to write an email, it's how to write it in a way that is effective with people from India and Spain and the United States and South Africa. You know, storytelling, tone for customer service, Slack communication for global teams. And I know today many of you are managers, you manage a team. And we just wanted to say that if you were to book a free consultation to see if this would be something for you, then just today you can get one of these, you know, effective emails across cultures for free as a webinar for your team. So, you know, if you're interested, I'll share the link later, but that's a bit a general idea, you know. So today it's none of these topics, but we are drawing from all these knowledge that we have, you know, from the different bits and pieces that we get from our learners. So
Does that, hold on, Paula, does that mean that people have to do a demo today to get this masterclass, or do they just need to book it?
they don't need to jump on the free consultation today, but they can schedule it and then have it tomorrow, next week, whenever they're available.
Cool. All right. Well, let's dig into it. So today's agenda, right? Obviously, you know, we work primarily with managers, with HR directors, VPs, when we're in the consultation phase, right? But when we actually get to the point where we're doing the teaching, where we're doing the training, I mean, I would say we have students from all functions, from all levels in the organization, but we work a lot with managers. And one of the, you know, most frequent questions we get asked are around feedback. They're around, how do we have one-on-ones? How do we make sure that our people are exactly this, are engaged, right? And so we hear this so often. And being that, you know, that communication, that relationship that you have with a teammate is about how you communicate together, there can be so many differences across cultures and different languages. And so we put this together, right? We're breaking down what are some very clear tips, some actionable tips that managers, whether you're in HR, doesn't matter, you can use right away and start using. And so we're breaking it down into these 3 sections. Now, we'll talk a little bit about this. Employee engagement is a huge topic, and it's one of those that, you know, really we've just thrown a ton at it, especially in the last couple of years. But we want to kind of synthesize it, break it down a little bit into manageable chunks. And so that's what you're going to walk away with today. You'll get the slides from today as well. So all of the tips and tricks and tools that we have, you'll get those as well. But when we talk about this, right, this engaged workforce, I love this quote around good communication. It keeps businesses moving forward. And this is, you know, this encompasses this engaged workforce. I think a lot of times when we talk about, at least before they were called soft skills and now we call them power skills, but a lot of times when we talk about this, they were often kind of brushed to the side a little bit because they're very kind of hard to quantify, right? How can you put a number on a good communicator, right? How can we say this person is, X good communicator? You can't really do that, right? So it was hard to quantify before, but it's one of those things where when you see it, you know it kind of thing. And a lot of the tools that we'll, be talking about today, they can be applied right away, and there'll probably be some that you've seen before and you thought, huh, okay, that was effective, right? That really pulled in on that engagement factor. But we really talk about these different terms that we throw around: happiness, satisfaction, engagement. And, again, we want this to be very, very collaborative. So if you're in the chat, let us know, do you think these are the same? Like, are all these the same? Do they mean different things? Do they overlap? I mean, what do you think? We'd love to hear it in the chat. Paula, I'm going to ask you first. What do you think? Happiness, satisfaction, engagement, are we just talking about the same thing?
So we're not talking about the same thing. I see Nancy said different but have overlap. Michael said they're different. Gina said they're all different.
All right, great. So I think maybe we're setting ourselves up for a little trap here with our own take on it. But I mean, when you think about your own experience at work, right? You think about yourself as an employee at Talaera. Do these three kind of separate for you? And when you get done with the day, do you think, oh, I was satisfied with how things went today, or I was happy or engaged?
They are interrelated. Melissa just said you can be satisfied but not happy, and I agree. They are part of a bigger picture, and they all come together, but you can have one without the other. So they do overlap in the sense of, if everything is going well, then hopefully you have all three, but
Yeah.
you can have one and not the other, and then you can have two, so in that sense, I do believe they overlap. Would you tell us, Simon, a bit the actual differences between them?
Yeah, and so again, I'm going to preface this with there is overlap. So please, everybody in the chat, don't just start hating me right away. But to make it easier for ourselves, right, we've broken it down a little bit into these three kind of sections of happiness being more of this intrinsic view and how you're coming your daily experience in the workplace, right? Do you feel safe in the workspace? Do you feel like this is something I wake up and yeah, I'm happy with going into work, right? Satisfaction is, yeah, exactly that, right? We do see a difference between happiness and satisfaction, more with the comp and ben and the job security. Do I feel, am I satisfied? Am I okay? Am I getting the sustenance that I need from this, from this work, right? And then engagement, right, is on the other hand, it is that what I would describe more as that kind of pull, right? Is there that pull for me of kind of digging into that work? Am I clear on what I need to do? Do I get the recognition? Do I get that pull from my workplace that draws me in, right? I think for all of us on this call that are in HR, you're hearing all the terms that get thrown out around quiet quitting and rage applying, and a lot. I mean, most of the time I would say that these are just kind of a revamp of the common issues that are always going to, that are always there when it comes to the workforce. Is how do we keep our people engaged? Do they have clarity in the role? Do they have trust in their manager, and do they receive recognition when they put in that extra work? And do they have clarity around possible advancement, right? So these are core principles when it comes to people in the workplace. And these new terms are really, rage applying. I don't know how much that fits in, but we'll be talking about these specifically when it comes to engagement today. And obviously, we know the importance of engagement, right? So, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but retention, productivity, profitability, all of these, you can see measurable kind of output when we have an engaged workforce. Now, we did this before. We did a version of this webinar before in the middle of COVID. And that's kind of when that big wave of that term, the Great Resignation. That sounds like so long ago we were talking about that, but we were discussing that then about how people were, yeah, becoming disengaged, and how could we draw that back? I'm not sure how much things have necessarily changed, where we're seeing some huge uptick in engagement in workforces. Maybe there is in your company. If there is, let us know. That's awesome. But ultimately, this is kind of one of those, you know, always going to be their skills, right? We need to keep our employees engaged. And that leads to the question of who's the driver of this, right? Whose responsibility is it ultimately? And I want you all to put the answer in the chat here of who do you think actually drives employee engagement? Who's responsible for it? Is it HR's responsibility? Is it the line managers? Is it the rock star CEO? I don't know. We may get some different answers. Paula, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing all of them, all three, everyone. Sebastian said the line manager. Rosa said line manager as well. Costa said all, but usually the line manager, all but be the most. I like these answers.
Yes.
And
Now,
yeah, provision and energy. I agree. Yes.
exactly right. Exactly. So what you're exactly right, right? Ideally, in a perfect world, this would be all, right? The entire organization, is tasked with making sure that everybody is engaged, because an engagement is a part of the entire employee life cycle, right? It's how the rock star CEO signals, the values and the culture of the company. It's how the line manager interacts with all of the employees from day one, right? It's how HR views, the people as the internal customer, as going the extra mile for the people, right? So it is everybody, right? For today, we want to focus on the actionable takeaways that managers can do, right? And so we're going to be focusing on the manager. Now, there is this kind of old expression of employees join companies, but they leave managers. Myth or reality? I'm going to keep you guys engaged today. So let us know what you think. I mean, is this true? I don't know about in your experience, Paula. My experience is kind of in the middle. I mean, I have left a team because of the manager before, but it was more complex than that, right? It is never one or the other. What do you think?
Yeah, so I do think people leave bad managers, but I also think there's so much more to it. So when you don't have the support from leadership and the whole culture, here we have Anna said bad culture produces bad managers. That's also tends to be true. So I do think that in good companies, managers make a great difference. But if the whole leadership and company culture is bad, so to say, I know that's a very simple word, but if it's not working, then they're going to leave the company. So bottom line, managers have a lot to do, but of course they need their support from top leadership for that to work.
Right, right. And so that's the thing, right? Is I'm sure it's similar to teachers. Like you can remember when you've had those like amazing teachers when you were, in school, and you were like, they were hard, but that was good. I remember them because they were good teachers, right? And I feel kind of similar when it comes to managers, right? Maybe they weren't the, most perfect, friendly, happy, manager, but they were a good manager in so many deeper ways, right? And we'll be talking about some of those kind of core principles today. So I love this, Paula, you found this graphic. We're a big fan of Liz here, and yeah, so tell us what this graphic means to you.
So this is a bit the angle that we want to take for this whole session. Like managers are like a lever that a small input can yield massive output. And so here is how can managers and you as if you're in HR or if you're in top leadership, how can you support your managers to adopt communication tools to make employees or to drive employee engagement. So having the manager as that umbrella that protects our employees from all that uncertainty that's out there and not so great things.
Yeah, and again, like this is I think we should kind of stop and consider the role of a middle manager is so difficult, right? It is really a difficult task. And more the amount of pressure that organizations are putting on their managers to be all of the things at once. You need to, reach the numbers. You need to be an exceptional one-on-one manager, and you need to keep everybody engaged. It is very, very difficult, right? And I think one of the biggest problems is that, often a manager becomes a manager because they were an IC, they were an individual contributor, and then someone said, "You're good. Your goal is to be a manager. Let's make you a manager," and you just become a manager, right? But there's so much more to that, right? And there's so many of these communication skills that need to happen. And then what we're seeing with a lot of our clients are, you're great, you're going to be a manager, and we're going to make you a manager and move you to Holland, or we're going to move you to China, or we're going to move you to Italy, and now you have to manage across cultures, right? And you just notch up the level of difficulty there. So, what we're hoping is today these skills will be able to really kind of clarify a few of the key points. And again, I love that you use that term lever, Paula, because that's what we're really using. If you have good, clear communication, it can really go a long way. So when does engagement happen, right? Engagement happens obviously throughout the employee life cycle. Today, you have, recruitment and obviously the war for talent is so massive. How you're actually engaging even your recruits through your employer branding, what have you. The onboarding, the critical first 90 days to 6 months, how are you making sure that all of these foundational aspects are put in place so that your the employees are immersed into the culture? How do you do that, right? And then the development side, how do you keep people by making sure there's the mentoring, the one-on-ones, the coaching, the feedback, and then of course, how do you retain the people that you want to keep in the building, right? And that's growth opportunities, shadowing, right? So there's so much where engagement happens, even in the exit interview. How are you getting those last sources of information? And again, we see so many people doing rebounds after 3 or 4 years and coming back to a company and adding value again, right? So, sometimes it's just see you later. It's not goodbye forever, right? So engagement happens throughout this life cycle, but we're going to be focusing on these three critical moments of the employee life cycle. And we're breaking it down into these skills and really the outcome that you want in these different sections, right? So during this onboarding period, we're looking to get off to a good start. And as a manager, what we're looking for really with employees is developing that trust and developing that clarity with employees. And so how do we do that, right? How do we establish trust? From this list, Paula, what would you say kind of sticks out to you as maybe the best way a manager could establish trust with you?
Oh, these are all super relevant. I did my master's thesis on change communication and change management, and it is very tightly related also to establishing trust, right? Transparent communication is key, and then a combination of being transparent and also listening,
Yeah.
following through. Like, it's very hard to pick.
Yeah.
It's all like the whole combination coming in together.
Yeah, and I guess it is what you, as an employee, what do you feel? Let's say if you're just onboarding into a company, I mean, you already are in this vulnerable area, right? Right there. What do you need to see? What do you need to feel from that manager to feel like, okay, I'm in a good place. I feel safe. I made the right move coming to this company. And I'm starting to establish this trust with my manager. And that's such a critical moment, right? If that goes wrong, that can have lasting effects down the line, right? For myself, transparency obviously is one, but clarity is a huge one for me, right? I really want to know, what are the expectations? How am I measuring success for myself, right? And these are so often kind of left ambiguous in the onboarding cycle, right? When we talk about transparent communication, we're talking about, during a change, like you mentioned, getting factual information, right? feedback, honesty first, even if it's uncomfortable. And then during conflict, like how are we making sure that we're using these skills, right? And so these are kind of some examples that will show that honestly we use these very often just amongst each other of, being transparent and, during a change saying, listen, like I can give you the facts. These are the facts that I have. And even, acknowledging that I don't know the whole picture, right? And I think this may be something that some managers hesitate to do in some situations. And again, it's very context driven. Let me just say that. But do you find that helpful if a manager will just tell you just what they know and then even let you know, like, I don't know everything. This is what I know?
I think that's great, but there needs to be a North Star, a guiding light. There needs to be a vision and a mission. Now, once you know that, I think it's very positive that leadership shows themselves as people that don't know everything. So yeah, being transparent also kind of reduces the uncertainty, because what happens when we don't have all the information is that we fill all the gaps with what our mind thinks is going to happen. And we do have a negativity bias, which means we tend to fill those gaps with information that is negative. So it is just better to tell people this is what it is, like we are working on it. We haven't made a decision because we don't have all the information yet, but as soon as we have it, we'll let you know. Or you can expect an answer by the end of the month. Just even if you don't have all the information, try to be transparent about your reasons and what's happening, because that is really going to make them trust you much more.
Yeah. And I think it's something that we've seen definitely through COVID are the leaders that have been transparent in that, hey, we're figuring this out, right? We're figuring out what is the best way for us to create a hybrid work environment. We're figuring these things out. And as we do this, we're going to make some mistakes, but we're going to, ultimately try to create the best working environment for you, right? I want to work for that leader much more than I want to work for the leader of, oh, no, we know what the right answer is. We're going to tell you kind of in pieces. We already know everything. We're just going to tell you in pieces when it suits us. But, you just sit there and just trust us. Don't worry. Right. I mean, do you want to work with manager A or manager B? And these are two different ways of how we're communicating here. And I worked specifically with one of our students last year around crafting his speech so that he was showing this transparency in his communication. Now, we need to be careful here, right? Like I said, very, very much context driven, but you bring up this transparency trap. Paulo, what is this transparency trap and how do we need to be kind of careful in this situation?
Yes. So we've talked about transparency and how we have to be transparent and share even when we don't have all the answers. But there is such a thing as a transparency trap where you're just sharing information that people don't need. So the difference between over communication and communication overload, I've also heard it as intoxication from information. So
Intoxication, okay.
the biggest difference is that over communication is about choosing the information that people need and then communicating it over and over again. That's good. That's like, marketing. In marketing, stick to one message and then you communicate it over and over again, many times. As a manager, you know that you have to say things a million times until it lands on people.
Right.
Communication overload is about offering too much information, things that people don't need. So that is a bit the balance. Over communication is great, but communication overload is not.
And again, this is if you're asking yourself, okay, well, where's the line between being transparent and then, offering too much? That's a great question, right? And again, that's why it is very much context driven. I would say probably, a good rule is, that's why you want to have good managers in that position so that they can make that call, right? But you need to also give managers trust in that position as well, that they'll know what the right call to make is. We talked about transparency, but we also talking about clarity, right? and this is for me, is I want to know what are the expectations when I'm going through my onboarding. I mean, this is something, people should be asking in interviews, or at least explaining in interviews. And you're even seeing it in job descriptions now of, hey, this is what your first 30, 60, and 90 days look like. And these are the expectations. And you actually see huge engagement after that's been made kind of clear, right? It's not ambiguous. You want to know what you're signing up for, right? We talk a lot about asking the right questions, and this is a skill not only for English as a second language speakers, but for everybody, right? Instead of, does this sound good? It's, okay, tell me, what are you, a bit unsure about or foggy about? Avoiding these kind of yes and no questions of, do you feel comfortable with everything? And in language teaching, we call that concept checking. Instead of that, we're leaving it open-ended of, okay, how did you feel about everything today? So they can't say yes or no. If you're asking a new hire, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel happy? Do you feel good? What are they going to tell you? They're not going to tell you, no, I don't feel happy, right? Unless it's a horrible situation. So we want to be careful on the types of questions that we're asking. We talked about transparency. We talked about clarity. What about vulnerability? Paula, from a manager, you talked about that you really want transparent communication. Where does vulnerability play when you're kind of getting to know a manager in those first few months?
So here it's all about connecting, and we'll talk about finding the right balance between empathy and assertiveness, right? About being warm and strong at the same time. But there is research, and we can a little bit touch on this at the moment. There is research that supports that being warm first helps you be a more influential leader. And being warm, part of it is about being vulnerable. And it's just about being honest about fears and failures. So, I take full responsibility for this, or when something doesn't work, show yourself as a human person. And then also seek out feedback. Don't put yourself in that pedestal where you're like, oh, I'm great. And that is part of your ego, right? If I made it here, is because I know more that people am managing. And it should be much more of a two-way street, where you also seek out feedback. How can I support you to do this better? How, do you feel like you're getting what you need from me as a manager? Or how can I support you? Mm-hmm.
And I think this is an interesting thing, because we hear this so much from when we're working with HR peeps of, hey, obviously we're sending engagement surveys, we're sending all these surveys, we're getting these onboarding surveys, and we're asking these questions. But when we work with managers, we talk about this with managers. Hey, this is something that you should be doing in the first 30, 60 days of, asking them, hey, what can I do better? Like, what's going to make your onboarding experience better, right? The better we can kind of put a check mark on those first 90 days, that's going to pay big dividends down the road, right? So making sure that we're, getting that feedback in the first 30, 60 days of, there are no dumb questions like, what do you need from me? What are you, foggy about? And we really push that as well. So that makes a big difference. Now, when we talk about trust, right, establishing trust, creating this clarity for new hires in the first, 60, 90 days, we're also talking about different cultures, right? Now, more and more, we're working globally. One of the biggest topics that, we work with is communicating across cultures, right? And when we're doing that, we're talking about, trust, feedback. We're talking about all of these time. We're talking about all of these different concepts that are understood differently across cultures. Now, how trust is established across cultures is also different, right? Like, we love Erin Meyer here at Talaera. We're a big fan, and this was one of the tools that she brings up is how trust is established. And we have relationship-based trust and efficiency. Paolo, can you kind of walk us through really quickly, what's the difference between these two?
Sure thing. So efficiency, those cultures that develop trust through efficiency, they think, all right, you do good work consistently, and you are reliable with deadlines, and I enjoy working with you because you make things easy. That's how some cultures build trust. Like, for example, the United States is a great example, or Denmark. But other cultures like India, Nigeria, China, even Japan, they need to see who you are. They need to share personal time with you, like have a coffee or a meal together. We both lived in Vietnam, and I remember this was a thing. You had to go for beers with your boss after work, because that's how they got to know you truly. And that's how they knew they could trust you. So when you have a multicultural team, we have a webinar coming up on, cross-cultural communication specifically. But we just wanted to bring up this fact of like, not all your teams will build trust and establish trust the same way. So it's really important to meet people halfway and try to really understand, okay, where am I in this map, culture map, and what can I do to get closer to these other people, to show them that I appreciate them, that I want to build this relationship at work.
And again, like when we talk about cultural differences, when we talk about cultural communication, it's always important to note that it is no hard and fast rules for, how this person is going to communicate or establish trust because they're from the US or France or what have you. But in general, we see these differences across cultures in terms of communication. And we definitely see this with some of the managers that we work with. I asked them to do this thing and they didn't do it. Now I don't trust them, right? Versus, okay, yeah, I was trying to build a relationship, trying to build a trust-based kind of working relationship, and they didn't want anything to do with it, right? They just, I invited them to dinner and they said, no, thank you, and then left. And I guess we don't have a relationship based on trust now. So those things happen. It's good to kind of keep awareness around that when we're establishing trust in these first period of the employment cycle. Now let's move on. We're talking about development. So we talked about the onboarding, how we're establishing trust, providing clarity, how we can do that with very clear communication, asking the right questions, making sure that we're signaling vulnerability, being transparent in our communication. Let's say 10 out of 10, everybody hits the ball out of the park, and now our employee trusts us and we're in a great working relationship. As a manager, the next phase, right, is talking about development and having one-on-ones, getting that feedback, and establishing that relationship where that employee can start to see the growth, can start to see the things that they're doing well, the areas that they need improvement. All of that is communication based, right? There's specific things, and we're going to talk about this when it comes to development, on why that's such an important part of engagement, right? I love this. This was a study where it was just very clear before we were talking about the huge impact of employee engagement and that war for talent. This is way back in 2007. They were doing the study on how important that is. That ongoing feedback and information flow is so important for employees, to feel engaged in the workplace. How often, and I think this is a big question that we just hear kind of thrown around a lot. If you're in the chat, let us know, how often should employees have one-on-ones with their managers? Now, this can be based on your experience. This can be based on your expertise as an HR manager, what have you. What do you think is the right frequency? And we may see different answers. I know I have an idea of what works for me, and don't cop out and say, oh, it's whatever works for you, right? Give us a number, right? What do we think?
We just had one, depends on the individual, but
there we go.
we got a lot of answers, very different ones. I love this. So weekly, once a month, once a quarter, weekly, as often as it makes sense for the manager and the employee. Some need more, some need less. Weekly, weekly, and no less than bi-monthly, as often as the employee needs. That can be very tricky sometimes. Weekly, monthly, weekly. What do you think?
Right. So again, and this is, I love this about communication and people and I heard this somewhere. I can't remember where I heard it, but problems, when we talk about problems, those are complicated. We can solve problems. People are complex, right? People are a different version. It's not going to be the same, right? There may be periods where I need a one-on-one maybe once a month. And then there may be periods where I need a one-on-one every week, right? I think it's how you standardize it depends on the company. I've heard once a week is ideal, at least for a small check-in, but at least once a month, making sure that you're actually sitting down saying, hey, how are you doing, right? Making sure that it's happening. And
Yeah,
again,
there was
not just thinking that, okay, because this employee said one time that once a month worked for them, that's always going to be the case. That may change.
Yeah, absolutely. There was this study by Gallup that says that employees who meet their managers at least once a week and employees whose managers schedule consistent meetings with them are almost 3 times more likely to be engaged. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
for at least once a week. I don't know if at least is like more than that. I don't know if that's too much, but that's what they found.
And again, and I think we see with experienced, really well-regarded managers, we see that they understand why these one-on-ones matter. It's not just to check in on work, right? There's so many different things that could be popping out when we're doing one-on-ones. And ultimately, you're looking for, fires that need to be put out. You're looking for opportunities for growth. You're looking for questions, right? You're looking for all of these different things. And again, that comes back to the questions that we ask and all of that, but we know they matter, right? But we know that they need to have impact, right? It can't just be a, hey, how you doing? Good, good. How are you? Good. All right. Thank you. We need to be intentional with our time, right? So we have a kind of a breakdown, right? One-on-ones with impact. Obviously, we want consistency is key. Having an agenda. What are the key points as a manager? What are the key points that you want to review? We've worked with managers who have literally walked through with us on the 3 key points of providing feedback that they need to give in a one-on-one that they are terrified to give, right? And we've worked through how can they communicate these points? How can you have that discussion? How can you communicate transparently about the performance? So having an agenda, making sure you're going through these, how we use active listening, the feedback we'll talk a little bit about. Again, questions, making sure that we're leaving and guiding with positivity, and always making sure that there's the follow-up. I want to quickly talk about active listening. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. We talk about it in other webinars, but it's kind of a term that gets thrown around a lot. We talk about the RASA technique here at Talaera. You can look up Julian Treasure, who created this technique. And it's a great way to make sure that your managers are actually practicing this active listening. Paula, can you kind of give us an overview of RASA, what it is, why is it helpful?
Yeah, so the RASA technique is an active listening technique. Let me see if I remember what it stands for. I typed it in the chat. So you have receive. First, you want to receive what the other person said. A stands for acknowledge. You correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Acknowledge, appreciate, yeah.
Right, you welcome that message that they gave you. The S stands for summarize. You summarize what they told you, and that's where you truly show them that you understood what they were saying. And then with A,
you ask on back, right? Is that right? So it sounds like you're saying the RASA technique is a combination of a lot of these different skills, and that you're making sure the person feels understood. Is that kind of what you're saying? I just did a RASA in case anybody noticed, that was a RASA, right? So using this technique, right? We work with managers a lot using this. And oftentimes with managers whose second language is English, they find that having this kind of framework to use, while it may feel a little bit clunky at first, once they're using it, they really get into the flow, and it really helps with this active listening and making sure that they're getting the real information. Okay, so before, during, using this active listening technique, making sure that we're asking open-ended questions, right? And you noticed I'm not asking like, is that a yes or a no? I'm like, could you tell me a little bit more about that? Or is that right? Is this concept right? Right. So I'm asking for Paula to explain a bit more. And then afterwards, right, we're making sure that we're summarizing this one-on-one, taking notes, and having clear-cut action items. Now, when we talk about feedback, right, the key point of, a one-on-one is to obviously do the check-in, to do all of those key points that we looked at before. But when it comes to feedback, this is something that we work with managers so much on. There's so many different points. If you're in the US, you'll probably hear the sandwich technique, which we kind of have moved on from here at Talaera. We're kind of focusing on this feedback wheel. Paula, can you quickly walk us through what giving good feedback means?
Yeah, so I mean, giving good feedback can mean many different things, but at the end of the day, what you want is for it to be helpful. So that's at the top of this wheel. And the way we developed this wheel was based on, not only American communication, but also communication around the world, like what works. And it's very difficult to come up with a one size fits all approach, but we've seen that this wheel is very helpful when you're unsure. And in most cases, it's super effective. So try to be helpful. Does it have a goal? For example, I'm mad and I need to vent. That is not helpful, obviously, but something like we need to improve the slides, or in my experience, this would be better than why, right? You have a clear goal and you're trying to be helpful. You also need to be encouraging. Like you have to go beyond feedback. What's your take on this situation? How could we avoid this in the future? Is there a way I can help you? Right. So you want to be, you want to give more than just telling them what's wrong. Now, for telling them what's wrong, usually when you want to give constructive feedback, there's usually something that you want to change. Here, and this is for me, the golden rule is to move from personality to facts. It's very easy to fall into that. We talked about some biases before. It's very easy to fall into the fundamental attribution bias. I don't know if any of you has heard it before, but it's when we attribute things that, so when something bad happens to others is because of their personality. He was late, oh, he's so unprofessional. But when it happens to us, we think it's because external factors. Oh, it was very unlucky that the bus was late, for example. So here to avoid that, to prevent that from happening, you want to stick to facts. So instead of saying you are unprofessional, try saying you've been late 3 days this week. What happened here? Try to be timely. So find the right moment. Here, it's important that you've already built trust before, and then always talk to people. Can I get 5 minutes with you after the meeting? Or I'd love to discuss this specific. This is a personal thing, but I really like it when managers tell you what the topic is going to be about, because otherwise it feels like that boyfriend, girlfriend, we need to talk. And that's very scary. But by saying, hey, there was something about this webinar that I wanted to discuss with you. You're like, okay, I know it's about the webinar. My job kind of thing. The relationship is still okay. And then you want to be direct. Cultural differences play a massive role. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in general, it's important that you are clear and you're honest. Sandwich technique may have worked in some contexts or at some points in life, but it's better to just be, people tend to appreciate honesty as long as you need it, helpful and encouraging and timely. So
Right.
it'll
Think about it holistically. Yeah. And again, like this isn't just something that will work cross-culturally. It's also now we have so many generations in the workforce now. I read something the other day of, Gen Z is would much rather look for another job and actually change to another job to get a salary increase than negotiate and go in and actually negotiate for a salary increase. Like, things like this, right? So there's just because of that conflict element, right? So there's these actual key points here that we need to kind of consider in how we're framing feedback not only across cultures, but also across generations there. So, okay. Now you talked about this direct and indirect feedback. This is something I would say with feedback is probably our biggest challenge when we're working with, I mean, we work with Russians, Germans, French, and we also work with many companies in Japan. I had a manager from Japan going to work in Amsterdam, and that was like an absolute challenge of understanding how can we handle this very traditionally direct Dutch culture with this traditionally indirect Japanese culture, and especially when feedback came into play, how we worked through that. Do you feel like this is a challenge that you've had in the past, Paulo, when it comes to with a manager? How do you navigate this?
It was. And I just realized that the site where you see Israel, Germany, Russia, that's correct. It says negative, direct negative feedback. The other side should say indirect negative
Yeah,
feedback.
indirect. Yeah.
Everyone's direct. We didn't mean that.
It's
Basically,
actually, it all goes around into one circle, actually. So, it's just ubiquitous.
it all comes together.
Yeah,
No, I have. We were talking about, you also lived in Vietnam, and there I did see the difference between, you know, people being much more tactful and polite, and it was very, very sweet, and it was just much more indirect. And then I've also interacted. I moved to Berlin after Vietnam, so you can see the big difference. And then everyone was like, "No, that's wrong." And then at first I was, oh, that
yeah.
hurts. And then I understood that's the way they communicate. Some of them, obviously not everyone, but it was a big difference.
Right, right. And like I said, right, we work with a lot of teams who have these differences. One of the best things that we find is usually, in those early stages, if we have a manager coming to work in a team internationally, one of the things we say is, number one, sit down, work on building trust so that when those feedback situations happen, that there's an underlying foundation of trust, right? That's number one. Number two is if it's a multicultural team, so a lot of different nationalities, we need to kind of decode as a team, what does our feedback look like? What does our feedback process look like? How do we make decisions as a team? How do I give feedback with different team members, right? So this is something that many times isn't considered until we're there in the one-on-one and someone takes something the wrong way. But just with a little bit of kind of focus on this early, you can really, make things much easier for yourself in the long run. Really quick, of course, when it comes to, we're talking about this area of development and, engagement in that central part of the employee life cycle. As managers, we always say action and effect, right? The follow-up. You never know with building that trust if it's more in that culture of you did what you said you would do, you followed up with this thing. That plays a big role as a manager when giving feedback, right? When, circling up with those action points at the end. So we focus on that a lot. Okay, so let's keep it moving. We got just a little bit of time left, but we're going to be talking about one of the most critical points in retaining your talent, and that is accountability and recognition. Obviously, when we're retaining, we're keeping the best people that we have here in the team. Losing people, we all know how much that actually costs the company. So retention is huge, right? But when it comes to retention, we talk about two key communication points: accountability and recognition. Now, with accountability, maybe initially it sounds like a little bit harsh, right? It sounds like you're holding someone accountable, so they're probably going to want to leave because they don't want to be held accountable. But actually what we find is that the all-stars that you want, that want to be coached, that want to be developed, they're going to thrive for that, right? They're going to yearn for that accountability because it means they know that they're growing with that friction, right? Where that learning process takes place. So when it comes to communication, we talk about communicating with facts, but then balancing, right? Balancing that assertiveness with empathy. And this is where really great managers do this well, as they make that balance happen. So how do we do this, Paula? How can we kind of make sure that we're communicating with facts, like we talked about with the feedback, but still show that kind of balance with empathy?
Yes, so first we start by communicating with facts, and here we want to use numbers. We want to balance you and we. As you said before, accountability sometimes sounds harsh, but it should be more of like an agreement and in a relationship. So it's that combination of agreement and relationship, and then show that you're invested. So instead of saying you need to be more professional, you did a bad job, and that's why you got that poor review. Well, keeping customers happy is important for us. You know, we are a team and we cannot afford reviews of 2 out of 10. How can I help you do XYZ? Or what happened here?
Yeah.
You're using numbers and you're also making it very clear that you're invested. Or instead of saying you weren't being serious when you said you would update the report. Well, I've seen that this has happened. Please make sure here's where you want to be very clear, so that we can assess the progress. So that's where you balance that you and we or I. And then you also want to balance that assertiveness and empathy that we talked about. You know, you want to establish a set of clear goals from the start. The very beginning is going to set the tone. Begin with warmth. We talked about this before. You want to have that combination of warmth and strength. You want to be warm and you want to be competent and strong. But research says that you should start by being warm. So you first want to be empathetic, right? You want to understand other people's feelings, and then project strength and your own needs, and then focus on solutions. Here we have some examples, but for the sake of time, we'll share the slides later so that you can really let this all sink in and take the tips and apply them to your own.
And I think this is one thing, just really quickly, something that really great leaders do. I know Adam Grant was talking about this recently, about, you know, how really good leaders they don't just rely on empathy, right? There are also high expectations, right? But it is about having that balance there. And it is, keeping these things in focus, right? Clear goals, that goes back to that clarity at the beginning, right? And then focusing on those solutions. Now, our last skill that we're focusing on here is how to give recognition. Again, we talked about how frameworks really help a lot of our clients kind of mentally work through how they're going to do things. When it comes to recognition, it really plays a big role in retention, in making sure that your employees are engaged. But how do we do it? And when do we do it? And why do we do it, right? Well, we go through these kind of 4 points, right? Making sure that recognition is specific, it's timely, it's social, and it's connecting to the larger goal, right? It's aligning with the organizational goal, the team goal, the bigger picture that we're working on, that signals that to the rest of the team, right? So what is the specific contribution the employee made? Numbers if you can, right? A specific assignment if you can. You know, recognizing this in the same week, not a month later, not, you know, way down the line, not in your, you know, biannual feedback, right? Making sure that we're recognizing that in the same week. Not being afraid to share that in the Slack channel with everybody, or in a meeting, right, at the end of a Zoom call, and then explaining why it ties into a bigger picture. So we have an example here. You know, this will really help us do Y as a team, right? This will help us do this. And this signals to the team that, okay, there is a direct impact to the things that we do and the exact outcome that our team is trying to achieve. And that's really where we have this kind of breakdown, and making sure that recognition is not only good for the employee, but good for the team. And if you can create that kind of positive recognition cycle, that makes it really helpful. Okay. So I know I threw that at you all really quickly, and we're coming down to the wire, but quickly wrapping up, we talked about the recruitment cycle of the total employee life cycle of onboarding, development, and retention. We're going to share the slides with you so you have those skills. But if you're curious and you want to see what else we have, Paula, where can people go to get a sense of our free resources? If they want to listen to our podcast, which was actually top 5% of education podcasts on Spotify. That was just a, silent brag there, no problem. But where can people go, Paula, to get a sense of what else we do at Talaera?
So our webinars, our podcast, all of that is on our website. So talaera.com, and then resources, that's where you can find it. If you want to learn more about what we do, you can book a free consultation. The way we do it is we listen to your needs and those of your employees and your teams. And as we said before on, at the beginning of the webinar, and you have that on the next slide, Simon, is that just today, this is the first time we're doing this. So we'll see if it sounds like we always get asked about this effective email across cultures webinar. And so many people ask us, can we have it? Can we have it? We sell it. But just today, for those of you who book a demo or schedule a free consultation, you can get it for free if you schedule it today, like by the end of the day in New York time or EST. So if you're interested, I shared the link in the chat. If you have any questions, hello, I'm going to type it in the chat as well, talaera.com. I just want to say thank you, because after every webinar, we get questions about additional resources and people are interested and they're like, do you have this topic? And that just makes us think, okay, this is cool. Like there is a lot of need for communication and communications training, and we just really, really love it. And people were super engaged today, which also makes it much more fun and rich. And this was awesome.
Yeah, a lot of fun as always. We have these webinars every month. So if you are a part of that 50 whatever percent that this was your first time, we'll see you next month. Like, keep coming. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we'll be doing over the coming months. And yeah, if your teams can write better emails across cultures, definitely check out the webinar and let us know. As always, we always end our webinars, our podcast, everything with a big thank you and keep learning. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.